Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the small town of Maplewood, where everyone seemed to know everyone else, the night was as calm as the breeze that rustled the leaves. A single street lamp flickered at the corner of Elm and Main, casting long shadows that danced upon the pavement. But this peaceful facade masked the simmering tension beneath the surface of suburban life. On a muggy June evening in 1993, the air was thick with the scent of summer blooms and freshly cut grass. The town's weekly events had already begun winding down, but for the local teens, the night was just getting started. A group of friends assembled at the old diner, a relic of the past with vinyl seats and checkered floors that stuck in the heat. As laughter bubbled over sodas and fries, they unwittingly brought to life snapshots of their lives that would soon dissolve into something darker. Across town, in a modest house on Oak Street, Clara Mason was preparing for bed. A single mother working 2 jobs to provide for her 7-year-old son, she had long known the weight of struggle. But that night, as she tucked her boy in, a feeling of unease crept in. It was subtle, just a whisper in the back of her mind, like the rustle of a covert presence. But she brushed it off. Another long day had left her too tired to dwell on shadows. Yet, as the clock struck 10, something felt different. The silence was sharp, the stillness unnerving. The world outside held its breath, tension coiling like a spring, waiting for the inevitable moment when it would snap. Clara wouldn't know it then, but the calm before the storm would soon evolve into a haunting reality that would forever change Maplewood and its unsuspecting residents. The victim. Clara Mason woke with a start. The haunting sound of silence replaced by a distant chime of bells, echoing through the halls of her mind. The early morning sun streamed through the half-drawn curtains, illuminating the clutter of toys and crumpled pages that formed the landscape of her son's small bedroom. Just as she brushed sleep from her eyes, a wave of panic washed over her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was the day after the diner gathering, and Clara's routine felt heavy with an unshakable weight. As she prepared breakfast, the dull clatter of pots and pans hardly drowned out the unease settling beneath her skin. Her son, Timmy, had an infectious laugh that could brighten any roomie this morning. He sensed his mother's distress. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, eyes wide as he carefully poured milk over his cereal. "Of course, sweetheart," Clara replied, masking her concern with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She needed to pull herself together. Today, she had a shift at the diner, and later, one at the local grocery store. Leaning down, she kissed the top of Timmy's head, praying this day would be just like any other. As she walked him to school, Clara noticed the air felt different, charged somehow. The vibrant colors of Maplewood's flower beds seemed dimmed, as if nature itself sensed the shift. Little did she know, the spark of instability was a mere precursor to the tragedy that would unfold a shadow darkening the doorways of her community. At precisely 3:15 p.m., the day turned from ordinary to extraordinary in its horror. Clara, finishing her shift, hadn't yet heard the news that would change everything. Young Clara Mason had been found injured and alone on the outskirts of the town, lifeless beside the rusted-out remains of an old school bus. The stillness of Maplewood shattered, and an uneasy unease began to settle among its citizens, one that would quickly evolve into fear. The victim's name echoed through the air, and the town would never be the same again. The crime scene. The sirens cut through the peaceful veneer of Maplewood like a knife, drawing curious onlookers from their homes. A gathering thrummed at the edges of the perimeter, marked off by yellow tape, a stark reminder of the horror unfolding just beyond the gaze of the public. Officers guided concerned citizens away from the deepening shadows surrounding the old school bus, now a grim tableau that would stain this community forever. Detective Brian Wells arrived at the scene half an hour after the first call had come in. He stepped out of his car, the familiar scent of asphalt mingling with something far more sinister as he scanned the area. This was not the kind of case he had imagined starting his day with, not in a town where the biggest excitement was the weekly farmers market. And here he was, acutely aware of the tangible tension pulsing through the air. Before him lay Clara Mason, her lifeless body crumpled at an awkward angle, clothed in a faded yellow sundress that frayed around the hem. Her once vibrant features were now pallid, like porcelain dulled by neglect. Detective Wells couldn't shake the knowledge that this was a young mother with a son who loved her dearly. As he crouched to inspect the body, the questions began to swirl in tumultuous eddies, each one more urgent than the last. Forensics moved with quiet intensity, capturing every detail. The bus's rusted shell acted as a makeshift backdrop, splattered with remnants of a struggle. Scattered nearby were fragments of a broken necklace, the shiny silver glimmering dully in the fading light. Wells felt the weight of the moment. It was not just a crime scene, this was a mother's last stand, and justice wouldn't come easy. An officer approached, murmuring updates, but the words hardly registered. Instead, Wells found his thoughts drifting to Timmy, Clara's son. Left in a world suddenly fraught with looming shadow. As the sun dipped lower, transforming the scene from stark daylight into twilight, Wells steeled his resolve. The early investigation. The first few hours following Clara Mason's discovery played out in calculated chaos as the small-town police force worked against the clock. Detective Wells remained on the scene, mind racing with possibilities, while his colleagues began the process of gathering statements from the increasingly anxious witness pool. Each person's pulse was quickening, a sense of collective dread hanging in the air. Back at the station, Wells mapped out a strategy. He scrutinized the notes from the initial interviews, and neighbors had heard nothing unusual, a testament to the comforting routine that defined Maplewood. He jotted down the names of those who had last seen Clara. The diner staff had served her just hours before her death. The delivery man remembered seeing her on her porch. Each encounter seemed innocuous, yet a bit of urgency tugged at Wells. The last person to see Clara might hold the key to unearthing startling truths. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Wells and his partner, Detective Lisa Garcia, split their focus between canvassing the neighborhood and diving into Clara's history. They learned of her struggles as a single mother, balancing active jobs, bills, and raising a boy alone. Clara was remembered fondly, a kind spirit who rarely found a moment for herself. But there were whispers, too. A couple of townfolk mentioned a recent argument with a former boyfriend, a relationship marred with hints of jealousy and frustration. Let's pull his record. Anything that sticks out could be worth investigating, Garcia suggested, brow furrowed with determination. When they accessed the information, they discovered a history of petty crimes, But more unsettling was the volatile nature of his last reported relationship, fueled by a resolve that burned like a beacon. The detectives headed to find this man. He would be the first, and perhaps crucial, lead. Wells navigated the town roads, feeling the weight of each passing house, eyes constantly drawn to the small white picket fences and plush green lawns that now seemed to mock the tragedy that had struck at the heart of Maplewood. As they pulled into an overgrown driveway, suspicions ratcheted up a notch. The house loomed ahead, decay whispering stories of hidden darkness. Tonight, they would confront the shadows, hoping for clarity amidst the chaos, unaware that the further they dug, the greater the peril would become. The dead ends. Detectives Wells and Garcia stepped onto the cracked pavement of the driveway, an unease gnawing at their insides as they approached the unkempt front porch. The air carried the scent of damp leaves and rust, a foreboding backdrop for what lay ahead. They knocked, the echo of their raps reverberating through the silence. A call into the unknown. Henry Jacobs, Clara's former boyfriend, opened the door, revealing a man worn by life, his eyes carrying the weight of unfulfilled aspirations and unshakable regret. He appeared startled, as if unprepared for the memories that undoubtedly surged to the forefront of his mind. "What's this about?" he asked, attempting to mask the tremble in his voice. Wells wasted no time, introducing himself and Garcia as detectives investigating Clara's death. The mention of her name hung in the air like a heavy cloud. "I'm here to ask you some questions about her," Wells said bluntly, observing the flicker of emotion crossing Henry's face. Was it grief, anger, or something else? "She was a good mom," Henry uttered, almost defensively, as his fingers fidgeted with an old frayed collar. "We had our issues, but I would never hurt her." Wells probed further, asking about the argument that neighbors had mentioned, but Henry maintained a facade of innocence, insisting that both of them had moved on from their past. Despite their line of questioning, Henry's demeanor shifted from agitated to eerily calm. He provided an alibi that placed him elsewhere the night Clara died. But the details felt rehearsed, and the timeline was difficult to confirm. As they left Henry's home, both detectives felt a gnawing unease. Hours turned into days. And as the investigation unfolded, every lead seemed to lead to another dead end. Witnesses struggled to remember details, and security camera footage from the diner yielded nothing unusual. Clara's son, Timmy, remained with a close friend of Clara's, blissfully unaware of the darkness enveloping the town and the night stretching longer than ever. The detectives found themselves enveloped in a cycle of unanswered questions. Feedback from Clara's co-workers suggested she had been buoyed by optimism, yet there was no tangible evidence pointing toward a motive for her murder. Frustration simmered within the precinct as pressure mounted from community members hungry for answers. Wells and Garcia vowed they would not relent, willing to dig deeper until every stone was turned. But with each new attempt came a bitter twinge of hopelessness. They were battling against time with shadows lurking, each suspect drawing them deeper into a labyrinth they could not yet see. The memories of Clara's laughter grew fainter, threatening to slip away into the very void they sought to. A break in the case. Days blurred together as the investigation trudged on. A blend of frustration and relentless determination coloring the detectives' every waking moment. Wells and Garcia found themselves sitting in the unyielding glare of the precinct's fluorescent lights, poring over case notes that seemed stagnant. Then, as if by divine intervention, a sergeant burst into their cramped office, breaking through the haze of despair. "Detectives, we just received a tip from a woman named Rachel. She says she saw something the night Clara was killed." "You might want to talk to her, ASAP," the sergeant announced, his eyes alight with urgency. The mere thought of a lead ignited a spark of excitement amidst the exhaustion that clung to their bones. The detectives raced across town to a modest apartment complex where Rachel lived. She opened the door moments after they knocked, revealing a slightly disheveled woman in her late 20s, eyes filled with a mix of fear and resolution. "I didn't think anyone would care," she began as they settled in, the tension palpable in the cramped living room. "I saw Clara that night," Rachel murmured, her voice low as if the walls might carry her words away. "I was driving home from a friend's house. I got stuck at that intersection near the old school. There was a man parked near the bus." Wells felt his heart quicken. Rachel described the Clara dark sedan with a man and a woman arguing in the vehicle. Clara was among them, her features animated in a spirit of defiance. Yet the scene quickly escalated. Rachel recounted how she saw Clara bolt from the car, fear etched on her face, pursued by the man whose features were obscured primarily by the shadows. "Did you get a look at the man?" Garcia asked, leaning forward, urgency suffusing her voice. "Not really, but I can't shake the feeling I'd seen him before somewhere around the diner," Rachel replied, brows knitted tightly together. The detectives exchanged a glance, their instincts firing. They needed to identify the man linked to Clara's last moments. "Can you draw anything? A sketch? Maybe talk to a composite artist?" Wells encouraged, frustrated yet hopeful. Rachel agreed to assist, and as she started sketching, an electrical hum of possibility surged within the detectives' hearts. As Rachel put pencil to paper, a thin trail of clarity emerged, a visage illuminated from the dark creases of memory. They stared at the rough outline, and Wells felt the churning whirlpool of hope as they finally had a tangible lead. Something to reach out for amidst a darkness that seemed determined to swallow them whole. The pending revelations would birth either despair or liberation, and this time they were poised on the threshold of understanding. 1. The suspect. The next morning, the precinct buzzed with a newfound energy. Wells and Garcia gathered everyone together to present Rachel's sketch and the key details she remembered. As the drawing made its rounds, they felt a collective undercurrent of anticipation in the air. It was a face, familiar to some, now coated with a sinister aura, igniting whispers that hadn't been spoken aloud. The sketch resembled Paul Reynolds, a local handyman known for his sporadic work and erratic behavior. He was often seen lurking near the diner, sometimes chatting with the staff, his charm cloaked in an unsettling unpredictability. For months, he had drifted through conversations, often dropping details about his sordid pasta background, plagued with petty crimes, and a harassment charge that had slipped through the cracks of memory. The detectives quickly set to work, scouring Reynolds' background for anything that could link him to Clara. As they pored over old reports, they found an unsettling commonality. Paul frequently frequented places known for patrons seeking companionship, engaging with women who might have misunderstood his intention. Was it possible he had caught Clara in an unwanted moment of vulnerability? With the details lining up, they obtained a warrant to search Reynolds' home. There was a sense of urgency as they prepared, the air thick with tension. Wells recalled Rachel's account. The sketch had felt like a key, unlocking a door to the past that had been firmly bolted. Arriving at Paul's residence, nestled in a run-down neighborhood, they stepped out into a world where hope could still flutter like a moth drawn to light. They approached cautiously, their hearts setting a frantic beat against the mounting anticipation. This was it. Knocking on the door, it creaked open to reveal Paul Reynolds, a nervous twitch flickering across his face. "What's going on, detectives?" he inquired, feigning innocence, yet the unease radiating from him told another story. Wells tried setting the tone with casual questions about Clara, watching the subtle dart of Reynolds' gaze, the way his skin paled at her name. "Can you account for your whereabouts on the night Clara was killed?" Garcia asked, her voice steady, the underlying calmness of authority pulsing with unfiltered intensity. "Just went home after a few drinks," he replied, his tone thick with uncertainty. But as the detectives pressed, it was clear that the broken pieces of his story failed to connect. They requested to search his home. As they stepped inside, a suffocating mix of dread and determination filled the room. It was cluttered, yet understated. Remnants of Reynolds' life sprawled out like a second-skinned debris from past endeavors, mismatched against the heavy stillness of the present. While searching, the detectives discovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Heart rates surged as they unearthed an item that stirred bile in Wells' throat: a necklace, unmistakably Clara's, glinting dully in the dim light as if taunting them. Every fiber of their being screamed for justice, but it was clear this was no mere coincidence. The suspect was before them, trapped within a web of lies and crumbling alibis. As the weight of that discovery settled heavy on their shoulders, the noose of truth tightened around Paul Reynolds, no longer an elusive specter hovering on the edges of the investigation. With his reputation cast in shadow, the detectives knew they were moving closer to unraveling a truth that had been buried far too long in the tangled underbelly of Maplewood. The trial. The courtroom was a microcosm of tension and uncertainty as it filled with familiar faces, each one drawn together by a shared grief for Clara Mason. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting striped shadows that danced across the faces of the gathered onlookers. It was a scene that had been meticulously set, anguish mingling with hope, the air electric with anticipation as the trial of Paul Reynolds loomed on the horizon. Sitting at the prosecution's table, Wells and Garcia exchanged determined glances, their hands clasped tightly around their notepads. Clara's family had gathered in the front row, the pain of loss etched into their expressions, a haunting reminder of the stakes at play. Clara's young son, Timmy, was with a trusted family friend, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within those walls, a child shielded from the reality of what had unfolded. As the judge called the proceedings to order, a hush fell over the courtroom. The prosecutor rose, delivering an impassioned opening statement filled with the memories of Clara's laughter, of her hopes and dreams shattered too soon. They laid the groundwork, weaving in the timeline of events, Rachel's eyewitness account, and the damning evidence found in Reynolds' home. The necklace, an undeniable link to the victim, shimmered under the glare of the courtroom lights, a haunting reminder of a life snuffed out. Reynolds' defense attorney countered with equal fervor, painting a picture of a man who'd made mistakes, but had no motive for murder. They leaned heavily on the characterization of Reynolds as a troubled soul, someone who merely found solace in the shadows, never intending for his life to spiral out of control. Circumstantial evidence is not conclusive, they argued, trying to sow doubt and make the jury question the threads woven against him. The trial dragged on for weeks, punctuated by the testimonies of witnesses who recounted their encounters with Clara, her warmth, her resilience, and the love she showed for her son. The prosecution pushed hard, yet Reynolds' defense team called for character witnesses, people who had known him for years, each attempting to chip away at the portrait of a killer. It began to feel like a wearying game of tug-of-war as each side fought strenuously to sway the 12 jurors. As they neared the end of the trial, the weight of the jury's decision hung heavy. Wells felt the gnawing tension in his gut, as if the courtroom itself had transformed into a living entity, sensing the impending verdict. Each day, he found himself observing Timmy's family as they sat through the emotional roller coaster, their grief palpable, intertwining with a desperate hope for vindication. One afternoon, it finally came time for the jury to deliberate. Wells and Garcia waited, their hearts drumming with anticipation. The days seemed long, stretching into eternity, each tick of the clock echoing with the fatiguing weight of uncertainty. Finally, the jury returned. The courtroom held its breath, silence punctuated only by the rustling of papers as the judge addressed them. As the jury reached a verdict, a representative rose, the moment teetering on a knife's edge. We find the defendant, Paul Reynolds, guilty of the murder of Clara Mason. The words reverberated through the air, a tidal wave of relief washed over Clara's family. Tears spilling unbidden as collective breaths were held in a moment of catharsis. The courtroom erupted in a flurry of emotions, anguish transformed into relief, the grief of loss tempered by the pursuit of justice now fulfilled. Wells felt a sense of closure begin to settle in, practical and achingly bittersweet. As Clara's family embraced one another, the bridge between sorrow and healing seemed to illuminate a pathway forward. Justice had been served, but the road to recovery would still be steep, laden with memories of the woman who had been lost too soon. From this moment on, Maplewood had a choice to remember with love or dwell, in silence but in the eyes of those gathered. There was only one path worth taking, a path defining Clara's legacy of hope and the light the aftermath. In the wake of the trial's conclusion, the town of Maplewood found itself walking a precarious line between healing and mourning. The conviction of Paul Reynolds had brought a flicker of justice, but the undercurrent of sadness lingered like the lingering scent of rain-soaked earth. The wounds from Clara Mason's tragic death still fresh in the hearts of all who knew her. In the days following, the community rallied in unexpected ways. A vigil was organized at the park where the green grass glowed under the midday sun, a stark contrast to the heavy mood that had settled over the town. Neighbors, friends, and strangers alike gathered in solidarity, lighting candles to honor Clara's memory. Each flickering flame was a testament to her bright spirit, a reminder of the joy she had brought into their Livesa community, bathed in warmth. Despite the chill of loss, Detective Wells attended, standing among the crowd, quietly observing as Clara's family spoke. Her mother shared stories of the laughter they shared, of bedtime stories, read under the soft glow of a nightlight, and of Timmy's endless curiosity that mirrored his mother's warmth. There were apologies for moments lost to grief, but in those shared narratives, there was a sense of collective healing. As the sun dipped beyond the horizon, casting long shadows across the gathering, Wells felt a pang of sorrow, accompanied by an unwavering resolve. Community leaders announced plans for a fund established in Clara's name, dedicated to supporting single mothers in need, providing resources for education and childcare. The town was determined to turn their anguish into action, seeking to build a brighter future from the darkness that had threatened to consume them. Simultaneously, the detectives had their own transformation to navigate. As they returned to their usual routines, life carried on in bursts of ordinary moments. Coffee cups clutched tightly in their hands, files scrutinized at their desks, mundane conversations punctuated with laughter. However, the weight of Clara's case would linger, irreversible marks chiseling into their consciousness as an indelible reminder of their duty to protect those who could not protect themselves. Garcia often found herself reflecting on the fragility of life, carrying that lesson into her interactions with loved ones. She reached out to family members she hadn't seen in years, rekindling connections and reinforcing the importance of presence in one another's lives. The investigation into Clara's murder had evoked something deep within her, a visceral realization that every moment mattered. Meanwhile, Timmy was slowly adjusting to the whirlwind that had enveloped his young life. Moved in with Clara's sister, he was enveloped in a cocoon of love, though the absence of his mother cast an undeniable shadow. Yet, even in the depths of their shared grief, Clara's spirit lived on in their daily rituals, bedtime stories, told amidst the soft hum of gentle music, her laughter echoing in the hearts of those who cherished her. As time wore on, the community continued its quiet, unrelenting journey toward reclamation, planting flowers in Clara's honor and sharing her wisdom through small acts of kindness. Detectives Wells and Garcia often found themselves stepping into the park, where Clara's laughter had once danced through the air. They watched as children played, giggled, and echoed the essence of life that continued forward through all the storm. The aftermath of tragedy was never straightforward. It lingered like an unfinished sentence, but within the healing shadows lay the promise of resilience. Maplewood stood united against the storm, honoring the past while still reaching for the future, each flickering candle a beacon guiding them onward, illuminating a path forward in honor of a mother who had touched so many lives. Reflection. As the seasons changed in Maplewood, so too did the emotions that rippled through its residents. The chilling shadow of Clara Mason's murder had cast long over the town, but with every passing day, there was a growing realization that the power of community extended far beyond the confines of grief. Those who had once felt isolated found solace in connections forged through shared pain, determination, and love. Detective Wells often visited the park now. Detective Wells often visited the park now. Its atmosphere radiating a sense of recovery. He noted parents encouraging their children to play, laughter mingling with the gentle rustling of the trees each moment, a testimony to resilience. Clara's memory remained alive in the stories shared by the townsfolk, capturing who she had been and who she had inspired others to become. In quieter moments, he found himself reflecting on the processes of life, the triumphs and tragedies that shaped everyone in their own unique way. Clara's case had brought significant changes, new community initiatives dating back to the foundation set by her tragedy, the resilience of 3 generations coming together to support the next. It was the sharp jolt of reality that reminded him of the fragility of existence, a lesson that resonated deeply in his heart. Reconciliation blossomed in continuing efforts to preserve the nature of their bond, a bond forged in loss, but nurtured through shared purpose. Wells remained committed to protecting the good in humanity, to housing that light within himself and his work. Garcia, too, had learned from the experience. The case had compelled her to reflect on time spent with family and friendships, a sense of urgency settling into her approach to life after Clara's death. The intricate web of connections woven throughout Maplewood seemed ever more vital, love and support, becoming the very fabric of the community's resilience. As the sun dipped below the lush treetops, Wells realized that healing was not a destination, but a journey, a continuous cycle of remembrance and hope. Even amid tragedy, people sought the threads of each other's lives, weaving them together through compassion and understanding. The story of Clara Mason would forever serve as a reminder of the importance of nurturing bonds, of the indefatigable spirit within a community that rallied together. Maplewood had found its heartbeat once more, pulsing gently through shared memories, compassion, and the promise that love, even in the face of darkness, could blaze brightly enough to light the way.